Welcome to the RapidMiner Resources training videos. This is one of a number of detailed videos which explain how operators within RapidMiner work with additional context to help you understand better how to use the operators for your own needs. This video is about the terminology used by RapidMiner. Within this video we will cover example sets, examples and attributes, then look at roles and types. We'll give a brief overview of documents and finish with macros. So let's start with example set basics, and here's one I prepared earlier. So this is an example set. Think of the example set as a table containing data with rows and columns, and the terminology RapidMiner uses for a row is an example, and a column is known as an attribute. So here you're seeing an example set, and you can see the name is at the top of the tab here in the results view. This example set has 100 examples, which means it has 100 rows, and it has 16 attributes. 10 are so-called special attributes and 6 are regular. We'll come to what those mean shortly. So if I were to count the attribute names here, I would find 16. The row number column isn't an attribute, it's just included to help make it easier to navigate around this view. So having seen the example set, let's look at what attribute roles are. Best way to see that is to go to the statistics view. This used to be the metadata view in RapidMiner 5. We're looking at RapidMiner 6 here. So each attribute now is represented as a row, and the attribute name is the bold text here. So this attribute is called label, and the attribute role is the small text above it. So you can see as you work down these, there's a name here, ID, and it's also has a role ID. And you can see that there are 16 attributes as before, and they have different roles. You'll notice that these 6 attributes do not have a role. These are the so-called regular attributes. So there's, in that case, I guess, no need to say anything about them. It's just known that these are always regular. Now, the role of an attribute dictates how it will be used by operators, and in some cases operators generate new attributes with specific roles. We work down them one by one. The label role is used as the target variable, say, or the target attribute by classification or prediction operators. The ID role is simply used as an identifier to keep track of attributes, and some operators need or use an ID. Cluster, that's a role type that's filled in by clustering algorithms. Confidence negative, confidence positive and prediction are typically attributes created by a prediction operator. So as you can imagine, the confidence negative or positive gives you a sense of how confident the algorithm is for the prediction, which is this role here. The outlier is a role type which is created by certain outlier algorithms. The weight role, that is used by certain operators and can be obviously created by certain operators and is used to represent a weight that is then applied to attributes in general. Batch is not often used, merely including it for completeness. And the final one is what I've called my role. This is a special role type that I've created myself, and there is actually no limit to the number of roles you can create yourself with your own names, and you often find that extremely valuable in order that you can create attributes and have them be ignored by certain operators. And then the final 6, the role here is regular, and these are the sort of the basic attributes that are usually manipulated by most operators to make predictions or whatever it might be. So the next thing to look at are types. So we can see the type here is actually represented on the statistics view. What I'll do is I'll sort these so we get groups of attribute type. We'll go down them one by one. Binominal, that is an attribute that can have two values, in this case positive or negative, so you might imagine that's like a true or a false. And you can see there are three attributes that are of type binominal. Next one is integer, so this is, as its name implies, a number, and a whole number. It can be negative as well. And you can see there are two attributes that have type integer. So this attribute type is nominal. Think of nominal as text, but not free format text. Each particular distinct value is recorded as one of the possible values that the attribute can take. And you can sort of see a hint of that here. You can see that one of the values that this variable can take is the text cluster underscore 1, and you can see here perhaps that there is cluster underscore 0 is another possible value. And if I were to expand this by clicking on the particular row, we could actually drill through to see all of the possible values that this attribute could take. So those three are nominals there. Next, real, so as its name implies, this is a real number, so this is distinct from an integer, which can only be obviously integer, and real values have decimal places and a certain degree of accuracy. And then the final type of attribute is text here. So think of this as similar to nominal, but it's required that some of the process documents operators, they have to work on text types, so they won't work on nominal types, so you have to convert the nominal to be type text. But to all intents and purposes it's similar to nominal. So now let's move to document types. So if I just go to my pre-prepared example, so I've created a small process that will create a document and the associated items. So I've got a process here, it creates two documents and then it processes them, and I've set a breakpoint on one of the create documents so we can actually examine what the document is. So if I run that, we'll see what you're now seeing is a document. So this is different from an example set, and this is the text contained in that document. Okay. If I go back to the design view, now what you see is that the process documents operator will process all the documents it gets and create an example set, but that has a special name in text processing jargon. If I press the continue button here, we can now see that. So here's the example set, and all the example set is also known as a word vector. And you'll also notice that one of the outputs from the process documents operator is a word list. So these are important concepts in text processing. Another important concept, if we go back to the design view, is the concept of a token. And a token can be thought of as a word, but actually a token can be anything you like. You can dictate different rules for creating tokens. You might have a sentence as a token, or a word, a single character as a token, or something like that. But think of a token as a word for the sake of this for now. As we get to more complex text processing examples, we can see how we can vary that to our advantage. Final thing, macros. So I have a process here. This is a simple process to create some macros. Now a macro, think of that as like a global variable that you can use just about everywhere. And you create macros by using operators such as the generate macro operator, and you can also create them in the process context, which you can see by doing show view context. Let's come down here. What I'll do is I'll dock it to the main thing here, and you can see now there's a small window at the bottom here where you can create your own macros. I go back to the process view. So I'm generating macros in this process, and macros can then be used in all sorts of places, and here's an example where it's being used in the generate attributes operator. So if I just briefly show you how I created these macros, if I go here and I click on this button here, you can see I've created a macro called integer macro, another one called string macro, and another one called yet another string macro, and you can see that's actually using a function, which is the date and time now, to create that macro. If I run this, and if I bring in another view, which is the macros view, I shall attempt to dock it somewhere where we can actually read it. This will do for now. So as you can see the macros that were created, here they are, and you can see the time I ran this, 5 to 10, and if I go back to the design view, we can also see macros being used. So this is the basic thing to get in mind. When you use a macro, you have to put a %, an open curly brace and a closing curly brace, and then place the name of the macro in there like so, and so that will assign the value of integer macro to an attribute that I'm calling attribute 1. And you can see another example here where we're actually assigning a string value to another attribute, and we have to put it in quotes this time to avoid an error. And if you recollect, again I run the process. Now you can see I've created in the example set an attribute called at1, which is set to the value 1, which corresponds to integer macro, and there's another macro which is called yet another string macro, which is set to this date and time, and you can see that's been set into the value of attribute 2. Okay, so that concludes this overview video, and you've seen example sets, examples, attributes, their roles and their types, a very quick overview of documents, document vectors, and macros.